Pause. Take a breath. Right now, in this very moment, you have everything you need. Not tomorrow, not yesterday, right now. And yet, how many of us are actually here? Most of humanity is living in a tomorrow that doesn't exist, worrying about problems that haven't arrived, fighting battles that may never come. What if I told you that this single instruction, do not worry about tomorrow, isn't moral advice but a precise spiritual technology for accessing a dimension of existence most people never experience? My dear friends, we have been given one of the most revolutionary spiritual principles ever uttered, and we have turned it into a pleasant platitude. When the Master said, "Take no thought for tomorrow," he wasn't offering comfort. He was revealing the mechanics of spiritual consciousness. Let us be clear, this is not about positive thinking. This is not about denying reality or pretending problems don't exist. This is about understanding where reality actually exists. And it exists only in this moment, in consciousness, in the eternal now. The prison of tomorrow. Watch yourself carefully today. Notice how much of your mental, emotional energy is spent in a time that hasn't arrived. You are planning, worrying, strategizing, defending against futures that exist only as thoughts. And what is the result? You have abandoned the only point of power you possess this present moment and scattered your consciousness across 1,000 imaginary tomorrows. This is not living. This is imprisonment. In thought, and thought, disconnected from spiritual consciousness, becomes a tyrant. It creates phantom problems, phantom lacks, phantom enemies. You begin to live in reaction to scenarios that haven't occurred, making decisions based on fears that have no substance. But here is the profound truth. Tomorrow never comes. It is always today. It is always now. Tomorrow is merely another name for a mental concept, a thought about time. And when you worry about tomorrow, you are literally worrying about a thought, nothing more. The nature of supply. Now let us go deeper. Why does worrying about tomorrow disconnect us from our supply? Because supply is not material, supply is spiritual, supply is consciousness itself expressing as form. When you worry about having enough money tomorrow, enough health tomorrow, enough opportunity tomorrow, you have already made a fundamental error. You have accepted that your supply comes from outside yourself, from conditions, from the world, and so you feel vulnerable, dependent, at the mercy of forces beyond your control. But I tell you, your supply has never come from the world. Every good thing that has ever come to you came through an invisible channel, through consciousness, through what we might call the Christ within, through your own being. The world was merely the avenue, never the source. When you live in this moment in spiritual consciousness, you are connected to infinite supply because you are connected to your source. But the moment you leap forward into tomorrow's worries, you have severed that connection. You have stepped out of consciousness and into mental calculation. And mental calculation, however clever, cannot provide what only spirit can provide. Dying daily to the personal sense, there is an ancient practice that few understand. Paul spoke of it when he said, "I die daily." What dies? The personal sense of self, the separate I that believes it must figure everything out, control everything, ensure its own survival. When you refuse to worry about tomorrow, you are practicing this death. You are releasing the personal sense that says, "I must handle this, I must make this happen. If I don't worry about it, who will take care of it?" This release, this surrender is not weakness, it is the ultimate strength. Because when the personal sense steps aside, something far greater can operate. Call it God, call it infinite intelligence, call it the kingdom within, it matters not. What matters is that you have created space for it to function. Each morning you can practice this death. You can consciously release your grip on tomorrow, not irresponsibly, you still take appropriate action today, but you release the anxious mental churning about outcomes you cannot control. Living from consciousness, not circumstance. Here is what changes everything. When you live fully in this moment, your consciousness becomes still, and in that stillness, you become receptive to spiritual guidance, to intuition, to the still small voice that knows what you do not know. Have you noticed that your best decisions never come from worried thinking about tomorrow? They come in moments of clarity, in flashes of insight, in sudden knowings. This is consciousness speaking. But consciousness cannot speak to a mind that is chattering endlessly about tomorrow's problems. When you practice presence, when you refuse to worry about tomorrow, you begin to notice something remarkable. Guidance comes, doors open, supply appears, often from completely unexpected sources. Why? Because you have aligned yourself with the spiritual law that governs all manifestation. You are no longer trying to force solutions from your limited personal perspective. You are allowing infinite intelligence to work through you, as you expressing itself according to its own perfect wisdom. The practice of this principle. So how do we practice this? Not through mental discipline alone, though that has its place. We practice this through a shift in identity. We must come to know ourselves not as vulnerable human beings struggling in a material world, but as spiritual consciousness itself, temporarily expressed in form. When worry about tomorrow arises, and it will arise, for we have been conditioned to it, we do not fight it. We observe it. We see it as simply thought appearing in consciousness. And then we gently return to this moment. What is needed now? What is present now? What action, if any, is mine to take now? All the great spiritual teachings point to this. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. The kingdom of God is within you. Be still and know they are, all saying the same thing. The point of power, the point of contact with the divine, the point where miracles become natural. It is here now, in this present moment. The transformation, my friends. When you truly practice this, everything changes. The quality of your consciousness changes. Anxiety gives way to peace, not because your problems have disappeared, but because you have discovered something that exists independent of problems. You have discovered your true nature, and from this consciousness of peace, of presence, of connection to Source, you find yourself guided surely and safely through whatever appears, not because you have all the answers, but because you have touched something that knows without knowing, provides without planning, and guides without the need for a map. This is the secret that has been hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Not because tomorrow doesn't matter, but because the consciousness you cultivate today become as the consciousness that meets tomorrow. Live here, live now, let tomorrow come in its own time. Your only responsibility is to be spiritually awake in this moment. Do that, and you will find that you are always exactly where you need to be, with exactly what you need, guided by a wisdom far greater than the worried human mind can comprehend. This is the pearl of great price. This is the treasure hidden in the field. This is the kingdom of heaven available not tomorrow, not someday, but now always. Now. Thank snorts you, living in the eternal now, understanding that spiritual consciousness exists only in the present moment, free from the phantom shadows of tomorrow's worries. The eternal now is not a philosophical concept to be understood intellectually. It is a dimension of reality to be experienced directly. When we speak of living in the present moment, we are not talking about a technique or a practice in the ordinary sense. We are talking about awakening to the only place where life actually exists, where God actually is, where reality actually unfolds. Consider this carefully. You have never experienced yesterday. You have only experienced the present moment's memory of yesterday. You will never experience tomorrow. You can only experience this moment's thought about tomorrow. Everything, absolutely everything that has ever happened to you has happened in the now. There is no other time. There has never been any other time. Time as we conceive it is a mental construct, a way of organizing experience, but it is not reality itself. Yet observe how we live. We rise in the morning, and before our feet touch the floor, our minds have already leaped into tomorrow. What must I do? What might go wrong? How will I handle this situation? What if that person says this? What if the money doesn't come? What if my health fails? And in that leap, in that movement of thought, away from the present, we have left the kingdom. We have abandoned the only point where we have access to infinite intelligence, infinite supply, infinite power. Spiritual consciousness, true consciousness, exists only in the present moment, because God exists only in the present moment. Not that God is limited by time, but that God is the eternal present, the infinite now that never was and never will be, but always is. When Moses asked for God's name, the answer came, I am. Not I was or I will be, but I am present tense, eternal present, the ever-present reality. This is why worry about tomorrow is not merely unproductive. It is a form of spiritual unconsciousness. When you worry about tomorrow, you have stepped out of the presence of God. You have moved from being into thinking, from consciousness into mental activity, from reality into imagination. And in that imagination, you create all manner of problems that have no existence except as thoughts. Watch a child at play, completely absorbed in the present moment. There is no tomorrow in that consciousness. There is only this block, this color, this feeling, this instant. And in that absorption, there is peace, there is joy, there is a kind of wholeness. This is not because the child is naive or ignorant. It is because the child is still close to spiritual consciousness, still living in the eternal now before the mind has been trained to fragment life into past and future. We must return to this not as children, but as awakened spiritual beings. We must learn to recognize when we have left the present moment, and gently, without judgment, return our consciousness to where we actually are, not where we were, not where we might be, but where we are. This is not escapism. This is not denying responsibility or avoiding necessary planning. When you are fully present, you can plan wisely for the future, but you plan from a place of clarity and wisdom, not from anxiety and fear. You take appropriate action today in this moment, and you release the outcome. You do what is yours to do now, and you trust that when tomorrow becomes today, you will again be given what you need. The mystical truth is this: when you are fully present, you tap into a dimension of consciousness that transcends the limitations of the thinking mind. You become receptive to guidance, to intuition, to what we might call the voice of God. But this voice cannot be heard when the mind is chattering endlessly about tomorrow's worries. It speaks only in the silence of now, in the stillness of present awareness. Every spiritual master who has ever lived has pointed to this truth. Buddha spoke of being awake, of mindfulness, of present awareness. Jesus spoke of the lies of the field which neither toil nor spin, yet are clothed in glory, living fully in each moment, provided for by the invisible source. Lasu spoke of the tohu that can only be found in effortless being, not in striving and worrying. They all discovered the same secret, that life is not a problem to be solved by anxious thinking about the future, but a mystery to be lived moment by moment in spiritual consciousness. And in that consciousness, in that eternal now, you discover that you are never alone, never without guidance, never truly lacking anything essential. This is the foundation upon which all spiritual living rests, not in tomorrow's promises or yesterday's regrets, but in the eternal now, where God is, where you are, where life actually happens. Everything else is shadow, thought, imagination. Only now is real, only now exists. Only now contains the fullness of divine presence, the illusion of material supply, recognizing that true abundance flows from spiritual consciousness, not from anxious planning or material accumulation. We have been taught believe that our supply comes from the world, from our jobs, from our investments, from our businesses, from other people, from the economy, from circumstances. Because we believe this, we live in constant fear. We fear losing our jobs, losing our money, losing our opportunities, losing favor with those who we think provide for us. We have made the world our source, and the world is unstable, unreliable, subject to change at any moment. But this is a complete reversal of spiritual law. The world has never been your source. The world has never provided anything. The world is effect, not cause. The world is the outer manifestation of consciousness, the visible expression of invisible reality. To look to the world for your supply is like looking at your mirror image and expecting it to move first before you move. Everything you have ever received, every dollar, every opportunity, every healing, every relationship, every good thing has come through an invisible channel. Yes, it appeared to come through a person, through a company, through an investment, through a fortunate circumstance, but these were merely the instruments, the avenues, the means through which something invisible expressed itself into visible form. What is this invisible source? It is consciousness itself. It is the infinite intelligence that governs all life. It is what the Master called the Father within, what others call God, Spirit, the Divine Presence. It matters not what name you give it. What matters is recognizing that this and this alone is your source. When you understand this, truly understand it, at the level of consciousness, everything changes. You are no longer at the mercy of conditions. You are no longer dependent on people or circumstances. You are no longer vulnerable to the fluctuations of the material world because you have discovered that your supply flows from within, from consciousness, from the infinite invisible that never runs dry. This is why worrying about tomorrow's supply is such a fundamental error. When you worry, you have already accepted the illusion that your supply is material, that it depends on conditions, that it can run out. You are looking to the world as your source, and the world always appears insufficient from that perspective. There is never enough, never any security, never any guarantee. But when you return to the present moment and rest in spiritual consciousness, you reconnect with the true source, not by thinking about it, not by affirming it mentally, but by being still and knowing. In that stillness, in that present awareness, you are in contact with the infinite, and the infinite by its very nature cannot be depleted, cannot fail, cannot be subject to material limitation. Consider how supply has actually worked in your life. Have you not noticed that when you were most worried, most anxious, most focused on lack, that was often when supply seemed most elusive? And have you not also noticed that there have been times when supply came from completely unexpected sources? When doors opened that you didn't even know existed? When provision appeared in ways you could never have planned or predicted? This is spiritual law in operation. Supply flows according to consciousness, not according to material conditions. When your consciousness is centered in worry and fear, you are actually blocking the flow of supply because you are disconnected from source. When your consciousness is at peace, resting in the present moment, trusting in the invisible, you become a clear channel through which infinite abundance can express itself. This does not mean you sit idly and do nothing. Spiritual consciousness always expresses as appropriate action, but there is a vast difference between action that flows from worry and actio, that flows from inner guidance. Worried action is frantic, desperate, manipulative, trying to make things happen through personal will and effort. Spiritual action is calm, assured, flowing, allowing things to happen through divine order. The mystics have always known this secret. They knew that when you seek first the kingdom of consciousness, when you establish yourself in spiritual awareness, all material things are added according to need, not according to greed, not according to worry, but according to actual need. And that need is always met, though rarely in the way the human mind expects. This is the great liberation. You do not have to know how your supply will come. You do not have to manipulate, scheme, or worry. You simply have to remain in spiritual consciousness. Do what is yours to do today, and trust that the same infinite intelligence that beats your heart and grows the trees knows exactly how to provide what you need. Your supply is spiritual, not material. Your source is consciousness, not circumstance. When you live from this understanding, worry about tomorrow becomes impossible because you know that the source which is with you today will be with you tomorrow. Not because tomorrow is guaranteed, but because the eternal now is always present, always abundant, always sufficient. The practice of dying, daily, learning to release the mortal sense of self each moment, surrendering personal will to divine guidance. There is an ancient spiritual practice that sounds morbid to the modern mind, yet contains one of the most liberating truths ever discovered. Paul spoke of it plainly. I die daily. What could this possibly mean? It means the deliberate conscious release of the personal sense of self, the ego, the separate I that believes it must control, manage and secure its own existence through worry and effort. This dying is not physical death, but something far more immediate and practical. It is the death of the illusion that you, as a separate personality, are in charge of your life. It is the surrender of the belief that your survival depends on your ability to figure everything out, to plan for every contingency, to worry about every possible outcome. Each time you refuse to worry about tomorrow, you are practicing this death. You are saying to the personal self, I release my grip. I admit I do not control the future. I surrender my need to know, to manage, to ensure my own security, and in that release something miraculous happens. The personal sense steps aside, and something infinitely greater can operate through you. This is not passivity or irresponsibility. This is the recognition that there is a divine intelligence at work in your life that knows more than your worried thinking mind could ever know. When you cling to personal control, when you insist on worrying your way through life, you block this greater intelligence from operating. You are trying to run everything from the limited perspective of the human self. But when you die daily, when you consciously release this personal sense each morning, you create space for infinite wisdom to guide you. You become an instrument rather than an obstruction. You move from personal will to divine will, from human planning to spiritual guidance. This practice transforms your relationship with tomorrow. You stop seeing it as something you must control and start seeing it as something that will unfold according to a wisdom far greater than your own. You take appropriate action today, yes, but you release the anxious mental grip on outcomes. You do what is yours to do, and you trust the rest to the infinite. This daily dying is actually daily living. Living in the only way that brings true peace, true freedom, true alignment with spiritual law. Consciousness as the O. Reality. Discovering that our state of consciousness, not external circumstances, determines our experience of life. We search for reality in all the wrong places. We look at our bank accounts, our health reports, our circumstances, our relationships, and we say this is reality, this is what is real. But we have it backwards. These things are not reality. They are the outping of consciousness. They are effects, not cause. They are the shadows cast by the only thing that is truly real, consciousness itself. Your state of consciousness is the only reality you will ever know. Everything else, every condition, every circumstance, every experience is merely consciousness made visible. If your consciousness is filled with worry about tomorrow, that worried consciousness becomes your experience. If your consciousness is at peace, resting in the present moment, that peace becomes your experience. Not sometimes, not occasionally, but always. This is spiritual law. This is why two people can face identical circumstances and have completely different experiences. One person loses their job and falls into despair, seeing only catastrophe. Another person loses their job and discovers unexpected opportunity guided to something better. What is the difference? Not the circumstance, but the consciousness meeting that circumstance. When you worry about tomorrow, you are actually creating the experience of lack, fear, and insecurity today. Not because tomorrow holds these things, but because your consciousness right now is identified with lack, fear, and insecurity. You are living in the experience of your worried thoughts, not in the experience of present reality. But when you refuse to worry about tomorrow, when you rest in present consciousness, you discover something extraordinary. You discover that in this moment you are whole. In this moment you have what you need. In this moment you are guided, provided for, held by something greater than yourself. This is not denial of problems. This is the recognition that consciousness, not circumstances, determines your experience. The entire spiritual journey is a journey from identifying with conditions to identifying with consciousness itself. When you know yourself as consciousness, rather than as a person struggling with conditions, everything shifts. You are no longer at the mercy of the world because you understand that the world is at the mercy of consciousness. Change your consciousness, and your experience changes not by willpower or positive thinking, but by recognizing what is actually real. Only consciousness is real. Everything else is its expression, its manifestation, its effect. The Christ within as ever-present supply awakening to the realization that infinite intelligence and provision already exist at the center of our being. My dear friends, we began by asking why this simple instruction, do not worry about tomorrow, changes everything. Now you know it changes everything because it returns you to the only place where life exists, where God exists, where power exists, this eternal present moment. When you live here fully awake in consciousness, you are no longer a victim of circumstances. You are no longer dependent on the world for your supply. You are no longer imprisoned by anxious thoughts about a tomorrow that never comes. You have discovered your true nature as spiritual consciousness itself, expressing in time but not bound by time. This is not something you must achieve in the future. This is not something you must become worthy of. This is what you are right now, in this very moment. The kingdom is within you, not will be but is. The Father is with you, not might be but is. Your supply is present, not coming but here. All that is required is that you stop abandoning this present. Moment for the phantom of tomorrow. Stop scattering your consciousness across imaginary futures. Stop trying to live life from the worried human mind and allow yourself to be lived by infinite intelligence. Each morning practice dying to the personal sense. Each moment worry arises, recognize it as thought, not reality. Each time you find yourself in tomorrow, gently return to now. This is the practice, this is the path, this is the way home to your true self. And as you practice this, as you learn to live in the eternal now, you will discover what the mystics have always known, that you are never alone, never without guidance, never truly lacking anything. The same infinite presence that has brought you safely to this moment will continue to provide, to guide, to unfold your life according to a wisdom far greater than worry could ever access. Do not worry about tomorrow, not because tomorrow doesn't matter, but because the consciousness you are cultivating right now is the only thing that has ever mattered. Live here, be here, rest here in the eternal. Now, and watch as life unfolds with a grace and perfection that anxious thinking could never have planned. This is your inheritance as a child of the infinite. This is your birthright as spiritual consciousness. This is the truth that sets you free. Go now in peace, knowing that in this present moment, all is well. All is provided. All is exactly as it needs to be. The kingdom is here. God is here. You are here. And that is enough. That has always been enough. Thank you. And may you awaken to the eternal now that is your true